This code sample includes two files, Ajax list.html and data.json. I placed both files on an HTTP server. Here, browsing at Ajax list.html, this is the output. However, if you check the source code, then you can see that we have unordered list without any list item. Then, over here, we have code in JavaScript that takes care after creating li element and adding them as child for this specific element. If we go over the code, then we can see that data.json holds code in the JSON format that describes an array of 5 objects. Each object has the property country with a specific value. Here, Ajax list.html, if you go over the code, you can find that first we have links for getting the jQuery and jQueryMobile libraries, as well as the CSS file required for jQueryMobile. Then, over here, we have a div element with the data role page that has 3 div elements as a child. The first describes the header, then we have a div element that describes the content. This is the main div element. And then we have the div element with the data role footer that takes care after presenting the footer of the web page. Now, if we check the div element that describes the content, the main part of the web page, then you can see that we have a UL element, but without any child. Now, over here on the bottom, we create an XHR object. We configure that object to be used for sending an HTTP request with the method get at this specific URL address. Let's fix it. It should be data.json. So that when the request is sent at this URL address, the response is this code. Over here, we take that response and using the parse method, we convert it into an array so that we could go over all of its values, and for each value we shall get an invocation for this anonymous function, while the value being passed over to the OB parameter is the value the for each currently focus on, a specific value out of the values this array holds. Those values are actually the objects described over here. So we actually get an array with the size 5 that holds 5 references for 5 objects. Each object has the country property. That's why when we iterate those objects and each time we focus, the loop focus on a specific object, this function is invoked and the reference for that object is passed over to OB. Over here we can access country, ob.country, because every object has the property country. Over here we create li element, or let's say an object, a node object that represents li element. Here we create an object that represents an a element. Then we create an object that represents a specific text, the text which is the value of ob.country, and then we connect the node object that represents that text as a child to the node that represents the a element, and the element is configured with the attribute href with this specific value, and then the a element is added as a child to the li element, or to be more precise, the object that represents an a element and its reference was assigned to a is added as a child to the object that represents the li element, and then the li element, or let's say more precisely the node object that represents the li element, is added as a child to the UL element, or to be more precise, as a child to the object, to the node object that its reference was assigned to the variable list. It is actually the node object that represents the UL element, this specific UL element that its ID is list. So the for each goes over all objects which are the values of this array, and actually change the DOM. Here we just refresh the list view so that all changes will take place and will look as items of a list view in jQueryMobile. Now if we go over here the code and try to debug, now let's place a breakpoint over here so that the execution is stopped for the first object the array holds. And as you can see here, I create a node object that represents an li element. Here a is assigned with a reference for a node object that represents a element. Then text is assigned with a reference for a node object that represents text, and then the node object that represents the text is added as a child to the node object that represents a element, and then the a element is configured with the attribute href and the value in this specific value, and then the a element, or let's be more precise, the node object that represents the a element is added as a child to the node object that represents the li element, and then in the end the object that represents the li element is added as a child to the object that represents the ul element. So that's why we get friends over here. Now if I continue the debugging, you can see how all countries are added just as simple links, and then when we reach this line, this specific code takes care after refreshing the list view. So this is the output eventually. So we get all new list items rendered to the screen.